everybody, welcome to the Let's Talk Review Show. My name is John, and this is the weekly show where we'll review a bunch of different movies, whether it be on 4K Blu-ray, on Blu-ray, or, maybe I checked them out on streaming, or even in the theaters. And this week we are going to be talking about Hocus Pocus on 4K Blu-ray, and we are also going to have our channel director reviews from Frank's Media Reviews and Mr. Smelly Potato. And those movies are going to be Swiss Army Man from 2016 and the British psychological thriller Triangle from 2009. And we're going to start it off with Hocus Pocus, mainly because it's spooky season and we got the 4K Blu-ray to talk about. So, Hocus Pocus came out in 1993. It is directed by Kenny Ortega, no relation to Jenny Ortega. And, he directed a bunch of movies besides Hocus Pocus, but I would say this is probably his most famous film, especially if you grew up in the 1990s like I did. When I was growing up, I used to actually watch this movie not just around spooky season. I just used to watch the movie whenever I could. This is one of the VHSs I wore out as a kid. But as I got older, I didn't watch this movie as much until about, 5 or 6 years ago. The thing is, my wife has always loved this movie, and it's one she'll watch multiple times during spooky season, so I've always kind of watched it, but I kind of fell out of love with it, and then I kind of rediscovered it, mainly around the time when Hocus Pocus 2 was coming out, and now it's an every single year spooky season watch for me. Kind of get those nostalgic feelings. This is a Disney film, so it's very lighthearted. It's, mainly supposed to be focused on children. That's what the movie's about, even though it's actually a pretty dark film, and it's got a storyline about sex in there that I think kind of flew under the radar for us 90s kids, talking about, only a virgin can light the black flame candle. I don't know what that's about. It's pretty strange that it was in a Disney film. Like, I was watching this movie at 5 years old. I had no idea what the hell a virgin was. As I got older, I'm like, wow, that's kind of strange. And at the very beginning of this movie, the Sanderson sisters, played by the great Bette Midler, Sarah Jessica Parker, and Kathy Najimy, they are definitely the stars of this movie. They are comedic gold in this film. You really go there to see them. The other actors around them, they are fine, but they are the stars of this movie. Bette Midler is hysterical in this movie, and she was a singer first, so of course we get the great sing scene. I cast a spell on you.
And now you're mine. What's up?
All that stuff is done so well. All the jokes pretty much hit. You can poke holes in this plot all you want. And, again, it's not the greatest film of all time. I remember critics, actually, if you go back, you can even read those reviews. They panned this movie mainly because it's not really supposed to be for them, essentially. It's really supposed to be for kids. So if you were a 90s kid, you love this movie. I love this movie about the Sanderson sisters who come back to life after years of being dead when a virgin lights the black flame candle. A kid who just moved to Salem, Massachusetts from California. So new kid in town. He's taking his sister trick-or-treating. He's trying to impress a girl. You know how this goes. And then now we got witches involved. And again, they're the best part of this movie. But overall, it's still a very entertaining spooky season movie. I love the practical sets in this film. I just love how it looks. It really captures that fall feeling very well. And one thing I found out is that there's a scene in this movie where they actually filmed at the same place that they filmed the opening of Friends. And you could look at that. I saw it in a meme. So I assume it's true, but I'm not 100% sure. But either way, pretty damn awesome. I just love how this movie looks. I love how it feels. And it's one I have to watch every single spooky season. And that led me to get this 2020 4K Blu-ray right here. I didn't get it in 2020. I ended up getting it a couple years ago. I want to say in 2022. I think that's when Hocus Pocus 2 came out. And Hocus Pocus 2, actually, I think we reviewed that on the channel at the very beginning of this channel. I could be wrong, but I think there is a Hocus Pocus 2 review here on the channel. Man, it's been around so long, I actually forgot if we did that review. But anyway, it led me to get this 4K Blu-ray, so I didn't get the Steelbook that also came out at that time. But I was very happy to pick this one up. And if you come inside, you get one 4K Blu-ray and one Blu-ray. That Blu-ray, the previously released Blu-ray, has a DTS HD Master Audio 5.1. That's the same one that you're going to find on the 4K Blu-ray. All of your extras will be on that Blu-ray. And there's not many of them. There's actually like a kind of a thing where you can watch the film with some almost pop-up video style facts and stuff like that, trivia, all that stuff kind of you could play over the film. That's pretty cool, I guess. I didn't really play around with it. And then you get one featurette, which was one of those old promotions for the film, so it's only 16 minutes long. You don't really dive too much into the making of this movie, but it's pretty cool if you want to check that out. And then there's just some information, and that is it. So pretty bare bones extras, but I wasn't really expecting to be blown away by the extras anyway. The audio, that DTS HD Master Audio 5.1, even though it's not an upgrade, it's still pretty damn solid. I was actually pretty impressed with it, especially with the mix of it, making really good use of the rear speakers. Didn't expect it from that audio track. They didn't really have to go all out for it, so that's one where I understand them, reusing the same audio track and not giving us a new one, especially since Disney, with their Atmos tracks, they're notorious for not being too great. They've gotten actually better pretty recently, but around this time when this 4K came out, they were notorious for pretty bad audio tracks, so maybe it was a good thing at the time. And as far as the visuals go, the visuals are actually the most impressive thing to me, even though they didn't blow me away. We only have HDR10 on this one. Now, the movie itself, it's a pretty dark film overall, even when you go from that Blu-ray to the 4K Blu-ray. But on the 4K Blu-ray, it just felt overall kind of dark, kind of like how Forrest Gump is. And that bothers me. I feel like if you would have brightened this up, this could have been an awesome looking 4K Blu-ray. Maybe one day down the line they can put Dolby Vision over and brighten it up, because everything else is pretty solid as far as the colors go. That's the biggest improvement you're going to see. And again, because it's dark, we are hitting those deep blacks nicely, and those colors, they're just much more vivid now, much more dynamic. Everything looks more natural as well. The skin looks more natural, especially coming from that Blu-ray. Everything looks just very faded in the Blu-ray, not much detail. And, I was looking at the Blu-ray and I'm like, it's not really a bad Blu-ray, but the 4K Blu-ray is actually a very noticeable jump. And it really impressed me because I didn't expect it to be that noticeable, because I wasn't blown away with the 4K Blu-ray while I was watching it. I guess I was just a little bit distracted by the darkness, that when I actually was just doing the comparison, I'm like, this is a very solid 4K Blu-ray, and I should give it more credit in that area. I just was kind of upset with how dark it was. Yeah, you can brighten it up, but you also kind of lose stuff when you do that, when you're kind of, when you're not keeping it in its designated areas. So, that's just one thing, and I just don't like to do it. So I did check it out on two TVs, and when I did check it out on this TV with the comparison to Blu-ray, it was a noticeable jump, so I could definitely appreciate that. And that was the best thing about this 4K Blu-ray, in my opinion. So it's a pretty good 4K Blu-ray. It's just nothing that's going to knock your socks off. I would just say it's solid. There is room for improvement, so down the line, if we get a new scan of this, I will be pretty happy. But what would I give this 4K Blu-ray at a score of 1 to 10? I would give Hocus Pocus on 4K Blu-ray a solid 7.5 out of 10. And the next two reviews are going to be for our channel directors, Frank from Frank's Media Reviews and Mr. Smelly Potato. And I don't have the physical media releases for this. I actually rented them both on Amazon. And the first one we're going to talk about is the Daniels. These are the same guys who directed Everything Everywhere All at Once, the Best Picture winner from a couple of years ago. This is actually the first film they ever directed. Before this, they only did music videos. They were pretty popular music video directors. But then they made this movie, a little-known A24 indie film. And this is eventually what led to Everything Everywhere All at Once, which is a great movie, one of my favorite movies of the year it came out. And this 2016 film stars Paul Dano and Daniel Radcliffe. Daniel Radcliffe, obviously most famous for playing Harry Potter, and this character is nothing like Harry Potter. First of all, he's dead. He plays a corpse in this movie. At the very beginning, we see that Paul Dano's character, he's on an island. He's stranded on an island all alone. He's got the straggly beard, the long hair, and he's trying to hang himself. And, at that very last moment, before he gets the guts to do it, he sees a body wash up on shore. That's Daniel Radcliffe's character. It's a corpse, and he goes up to it. And then this is something you'll see in the trailer for this movie, and this is kind of what, drew people's attention, because you're like, what the hell is this movie about? The corpse, it's a farting corpse, and that is what essentially, well, actually it's what Paul Dano uses to get back onto the main land. He uses that as a jet ski to get across the land, and there's a bunch of weird things that this thing can do, and that's why it's called Swiss Army Man, much like a Swiss Army knife. It has multiple uses, so he uses it to get to the mainland, and then he also can turn water into fresh water. And he uses, I think they even list this on the Wikipedia as like his dick compass. It points in the way that they're supposed to go. So this movie is just very strange. And when this movie debuted, people walked out of the theater because it was a bunch of snooty critics and they didn't really understand what the movie was going for. Because this movie, despite having all of that, is very philosophical. Once Daniel Radcliffe's character starts to come back to life, it's because of love, and it's about life itself and how Paul Dano's character is teaching him what it means to live. And in this case, he's imagining a relationship with a girl that Paul Dano just has a crush on, that he kind of snapped a picture of, and it's the background on his phone. And he convinces Daniel Radcliffe that was his girlfriend before he died. And, it's all these emotions, and it's like a child where he's learning what life means. And this is where he starts to not understand what Paul Dano's trying to say to him about how certain taboo subjects that we all go through and we don't speak out loud about, that's just inappropriate to talk about in public. And Daniel Radcliffe's character is like, I don't like that, where you have to hide who we truly are. Again, this movie turns into a very philosophical film that leads to, in my opinion, like a very sad ending. And it's very similar to the ending of Birdman, in my opinion, where you're not too sure if what you've seen actually happened or if this is all in a character's head. I don't want to spoil it too much, but it's really open to interpretation because, the movie itself is full of just surrealism images. And it really works for this movie. Again, the Daniels would double down on this with Everything Everywhere All at Once, which just became more mainstream and more popular in this movie. I think in 2016, people weren't ready for this type of movie, but it really is similar in tone to Everything Everywhere All at Once. It's just Everything Everywhere All at Once just kind of takes it to the next level. A lot more set pieces, a lot more actors in that movie. Clearly a bigger budget, but again, they were able to draw in two actors like Daniel Radcliffe and Paul Dano, two great actors, playing off each other perfectly, who have to fully commit to their roles. If they don't commit to their roles, this movie does not work. They are really the only two actors in this movie until the very end of it. So they have to really shine in their performances, commit to what the Daniels were going for, because again, it can seem very strange and weird, but it works. And I really enjoyed Swiss Army Man. If I was going to give this movie a score of 1 to 10, I would give this movie an 8.5 out of 10. And then the third and final movie that we're going to talk about this week is Triangle from 2009. This one was directed by Christopher Smith, and it stars Melissa George and also one of the Hemsworth, Liam Hemsworth. I think that was the one that was married to Miley Cyrus, is in this movie as well in a small role, but it's really Maggie George's movie. And this movie really fascinated me. It's a psychological thriller, and it's like one of those movies very much like Jacob's Ladder, and it also clearly was inspired by deja vu, the phenomenon of deja vu, which I found out pretty recently. Not everybody experiences that, and also not everybody has an inner monologue. Only 83% of people have an inner monologue. Actually, someone who I work with in my regular job, apparently, she doesn't have an inner monologue, and it's very strange. She has to count things on her hand because she can't keep it inside. So, it's fascinating. So if you watch this movie and you have experienced deja vu and you know what deja vu is, where you feel like you've experienced this before, maybe in a dream, and then also when you realize you're experiencing it, you're like, oh, I can change it, but then you realize that all those changes you're trying to make are actually what happened previously. So it's like, I'm not actually changing anything. It's almost about fate, and what's gonna happen is gonna happen anyway, because Maggie George's character at the beginning of this movie, she shows up, she's gonna be going sailing with the guy who comes into the diner that she works at. We see very early on that she has a son with special needs, and we think it's wearing her down, and we see all the stress on her face. Apparently, on the way there, she drops off her son at a special needs school that's open 7 days a week, and she's worn down and tired. She goes and takes a nap at the bottom of this boat, and then she goes upstairs after she wakes up again. She's very, very out of it, and like, I'm at the beginning, and while I'm watching the movie, all the editing is choppy, and I'm like, this isn't very well done. And then you realize they're trying to set up the fact that not only is she very confused about what's going on, but you're very confused as well, because the editing, it's choppy, but it's choppy intentionally. And as the movie goes on, it gets less and less choppy and less noticeable. We're trying to confuse the people who are watching the movie, like our lead characters, because all of a sudden, the boat just stops. And why is that? Because the wind stops on a dime. And then at that same time, we see like this big cloud that just forms over the boat. And after all this rain finally clears, and we think they're going to die, the boat flips over and everything, a cruise liner just comes out of the sky. It like literally comes out of the sky, out of the clouds. This big, beautiful cruise ship that you're like, what the fuck is going on? Like, it looks very old. They get on board, and they're really the only ones on board. So they think. All of a sudden, someone starts picking them off one by one. And Maggie George's character is like, I feel like I've been here before. And she's getting that phenomenon of deja vu. And as the movie goes on, it just gets more and more confusing. And I'm not going to give anything else away, because I figured out what was going on in this movie about halfway through, and that was a little bit disappointing, because I was like, I know exactly how this movie's going to end, and it ended that way, and it still worked. I still really loved it, just like The Sixth Sense. Once you find out the ending, it doesn't ruin the movie. In fact, it makes rewatching the movie even better, and I imagine that's exactly what's going to happen now. Still love this movie. All the answers are there for you, laid out as you go on, so if you pay attention, you can figure it out too. And I really enjoyed this movie. I love how it was shot. Like I said, you might think it's like bad filmmaking, but it's intentional, and I think in the end of it, it's actually done very well. And I really did enjoy this movie. The acting didn't blow me away by pretty much anyone else but Maggie George's character, and even like I said, I might have not loved that acting as a choice in the early part of the movie, but I guess it ends up working in the end. But I don't think any of the actors truly blew me away. The direction is what I loved about this movie, and I think it's a very well done screenplay. So overall, I really enjoyed this movie. This is one I could see a boutique label doing a great 4K Blu-ray down the line, and definitely one you should check out. So if you haven't seen Triangle from 2009, it's definitely worth your time and money. And just like Swiss Army Man, I'm going to give this one a really solid 8.5 out of 10. So I watched a bunch of good movies this week. Thanks for the recommendations, guys. And if you guys also want to become a channel director or maybe a channel producer like John Doe Juggalo and Jason Martin, or just a friend of the channel, you could do that. We do have channel memberships if you do want to help support the channel financially. But if you got no money to throw away, guys, don't worry about it at all. We just hope you enjoyed this video. And if you did, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Tell your friends about us. And then we'll be seeing you around.